Taliban have now officially entered Kabul after Ashraf Ghani, the president of Afghanistan, fled the country. We're told his national security advisor has also fled with him. They've gone to Tajikistan. Locals are staring at an uncertain future as chaos prevailed on the streets of Kabul through the day today. Especially unnerved and scared are women in Afghanistan. Remember, the older women, they have seen what Taliban's brutal regime was like more than 20 years ago. The younger ones fear this is the return of Taliban Raj.
Kabul is now under Taliban's control. After 2 decades, the medieval radical Islamist Taliban are ruling the roost once again, amid a meltdown of the Afghan security apparatus, which meekly gave in to advancing Taliban. President Ashraf Ghani left the country for Tajikistan with his NSA hours after Taliban overran capital Kabul. Ghani's exit means that Afghanistan no longer has an internationally recognized government. Taliban rejoicing victory and relishing the newfound power. Outgoing Defense Minister of Afghanistan gave a bizarre assurance to hapless Afghans, pledging that forces will do whatever they can to protect the people. The remnant of the government said there will be peaceful transition of power.
The security of the city has been guaranteed. There will be no attack on the city. The big city and the power will be handed over to a temporary third party, and it is our duty to secure the city. Don't be victim of their propaganda. Kabul will be safe. Don't worry. There won't be any problems in Kabul.
But fear is palpable among people who have seen horrific atrocities by the Taliban.
We left our house with nothing but a few articles of clothes, and that's it. We had to leave all the books, everything that my father gave me, and just leave. A lot of chaotic and mess around.
While the US deployed Chinook to airlift its embassy staff in Kabul via multiple sorties, India, which played a crucial role in rebuilding Afghanistan, evacuated its last remaining personnel through a special flight. Bureau Report, India Today.
Let me now get you the latest from Kabul. Joining me on the broadcast is Kanika Gupta, reporting from Ground Zero. Kanika, what can you tell us about the situation on the streets of Kabul at this point of time?
At this point, the streets are largely quiet. I mean, there was a lot of panic initially in the morning when the news broke out about Taliban entering the city limits. And for the first couple of hours, there was a lot of commotion on the streets. People were trying to reach home. Everybody, all the shops were closed. And there was a lot of nervousness and panic amongst people. But for now, it is largely quiet. There has been no movement on the streets right now. Around in the evening, there were still some people, but right now it's completely quiet. It's absolutely dead on the streets.
And have you had an opportunity to speak to women? We've been hearing some rather alarming reports about fear stalking the streets of Kabul, and women extremely scared what might happen in the days ahead. We've heard there are reports that several lined up outside various embassies, desperately seeking visas, trying to escape.
Yes, there is a lot of fear amongst women because they are looking at a very uncertain future. They feel as though everything that they've worked for in the last 2 decades has been to nothing. So there is a widespread fear, and of course there's a lot of panic amongst them, especially the women who are working in public spaces, in high government offices. They are especially scared for their lives as well as their future from this point onwards. So there is a lot of clamoring for visas outside of Afghanistan. They have been trying to get into India or any other country, whoever will take them at this point. So there's definitely a lot of panic, and women are especially extremely scared for what is now in store for them. with reference to how it was in the past when Taliban was in power for about 5 to 6 years, there was a complete, they were in complete lockdown. They were not allowed to mingle in the public spaces. They were not allowed to educate themselves. So between then and now, they really worry for their future.
What about the Indian mission in Kabul? Are officials still there? Are our diplomats still there? We're told that the United States sent in Chinooks, evacuated their staff. The British are doing the same. What more do we know about the Indian mission?
As I have been in constant touch with the Indian embassy, I have been informed that there are still people there and that the visas are being issued. I mean, I was speaking to someone yesterday and they told me that the visas are still being issued to Afghan nationals, but I am not aware of the current situation, if they are still here or if they have been evacuated from the country.
Kanika Gupta, for the moment, many thanks for joining me. Stay safe. I will come back to you for more. There are two images and an eerie return of US capitulation. In 1975, Vietnam ousted the US troops. 4 decades later, US Marines are once again evacuating American nationals from Kabul. And it's eerily, just look at these images. Helicopters on the rooftop of US mission evacuating people in Saigon in 1975. Exactly the same thing happening in Kabul in 2021.
Why is this photograph of the infamous US evacuation from Saigon, Vietnam in 1975 going viral today? Well, that's because it's eerily similar to an image today from Kabul. In both photographs, taken 46 years apart, US Army Chinook helicopters are visible hovering over US embassy buildings to extract staff in both these cities under siege. In 1975, it was the Viet Cong. In 2021, it's the Taliban. If history has a devastating way of repeating itself, here's the visual proof. In the words of some observers, the US pullout from Afghanistan is now playing out as an even more horrifying sequel to the humiliating, bruising defeat of American forces in Saigon nearly half a century ago. For the United States, the surge of the Taliban back to power in Afghanistan is the 21st century's most resounding military reversal. Consider these images a few days ago from the Bagram Air Base, the heart of US special operations in Afghanistan, from where missions to kill Osama bin Laden in Pakistan and several terrorist leaders were launched.
Each and every mountain of this airbase surrounding it was being monitored by the US designers, and that is why they were using this base for the air operations, which was the main task of the American forces.
The base is now abandoned, deserted, and taken over by the Taliban. Remember, it was only weeks after the 9/11 attacks in New York City and Washington that the US famously invaded Afghanistan as part of Operation Enduring Freedom. Since then, it has poured untold billions into building an Afghan national military force, one that could hold its own and shape the future of the country. But all those American billions, all those plans, and 2 decades of US presence in the war-torn country simply disintegrated in front of the world in a matter of days. With the Taliban sweeping through one city after another, making short work of the grand defenses the US had claimed to have built. Not only has the Taliban's rise made the US look defeated and bruised, but has confirmed what the Taliban has always said about Washington. One day you will get tired and leave, and when that day comes, we will be ready to take over. And that is precisely what is happening. As the US now scurries to evacuate its Kabul embassy and pull out its citizens while the Taliban holds position at the gates of Kabul, history will be smiling ruefully at this unending cycle. Bureau Report, India Today.
And US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has called for a peaceful resolution and a peaceful transfer of power in Afghanistan. Let's listen in.
We have a team in Doha to do that, working with the United Nations, working with other interested countries, including Qatar, to see if there can be a peaceful resolution going forward, a peaceful settlement, a peaceful transfer of power. That would be good for the people of Afghanistan to avoid further bloodshed.
So is this peaceful resolution of the situation? Ashraf Ghani has fled the country. Taliban is now officially inside Kabul. There's a curfew in place, but there's fear that stalks the streets of Afghanistan. Or is this just the beginning, as many fear in Afghanistan, of the return of the dark ages? Joining me on the broadcast, India Today's executive editor Sandeep Unnithan. Ambassador Vivek Karju is a former ambassador to Afghanistan, also former secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs. Lieutenant General Syed Ata Hasnain is former Kashmir Corps commander, keeps a hawk eye on developments in the AFPAC region. And of course, Ambassador Vishnu Prakash joins me on the broadcast. And if I may, Ambassador Karju, how do you look at the situation at this point of time with Ashraf Ghani? As you very rightly pointed out in our earlier debate this evening, he's fled the country, apparently gone to Tajikistan with the senior leadership, and Taliban now in Kabul.
Well, I for one have never had any respect for Ashraf Ghani's leadership. I'm sorry, I'm using very harsh words for a president of a country. But I've known him for 20 years. He's a great scholar, a great academic. But he was no political leader. And I think the fact that he won 2 elections only shows how rotten the Afghan political process had become. Because quite frankly, one doesn't need to sort of have recriminations at this hour. But quite frankly, Dr. Abdullah was robbed of both these elections, and that, I think, has contributed to the kind of fraying of unity among the Afghan political elite. And that led to a certain disillusionment among the people. And what is most significant today, Gaurav, is that there was a requirement of intimate knowledge of the Afghan society, of Afghan polity, of Afghan history to appreciate what was happening. But simply put, the Americans were incapable of all that. Because what's most remarkable is that the Taliban, which is essentially a Pashtun force,
yes,
and among the Pashtuns, the Gilgit force, was able to build enormous influence, quite clearly from what has happened over the last 10 weeks, in the Tajik areas, in the Uzbek areas.
Yes.
I'm not aware of the Hazara areas. I think they haven't really been able to do it in the Hazara areas. And and this is an important point for everyone to know, that the Taliban, who dislike the Shias, the Hazara Shias enormously,
massacred them last time.
Yes, but they have not entered Hazara Jat except Daikundi, where there's been some trouble. Daikundi adjoins Ghazni.
Yes.
So given this, it is quite clearly a signal to the Iranians. And that is the thought which is coming to me all through this evening, that that their leadership is showing a degree of sophistication because they want to retain international legitimacy. And
that's a very interesting point that you make out.
Chinese,
that's a very interesting point that you make out.
Let me conclude this. Gaurav, let me conclude this.
Yes.
The Pakistanis, the Chinese and the Russians are telling them that it's important to retain their legitimacy. But the question mark is if this leadership will be able to control the ground troops, which are obviously in an exultant mood and whose worldview is not as sophisticated as that of the leadership.
So I'll come to that aspect in just a moment. So are we saying that these 7 or 8 groups of factions that comprise the Taliban, including the Haqqani network and the Quetta Shura and Mullah Omar's son and all of them and the fighters on ground, are they different factions? And will there then be a Doha camp and a Pakistan camp? I'll come to that aspect in just a moment. But General Hasnain, if I may, The US president just about a month ago seemed to indicate that the 300,000 strong Afghan national army that had been trained by the Americans, armed by the Americans, led by the Americans, they will be able to withstand, if at all there would be an assault by the Taliban. And he said there will not be a Saigon in Kabul in 2021. But sir, there has been a Saigon in Kabul just this morning. General, I think you are on mute. I would request you, if you can, unmute and then speak, sir.
Gaurav, so sorry. I'm so sorry, Gaurav. There's no doubt what the president was saying, that it will not be repeated, is being repeated. It happened in Saigon. It happened in Somalia. It happened while trying to get the hostages out of Tehran. It's always happened with helicopters. Some of our helicopters have had a poor history as far as the Americans are concerned. But that's the thing apart. As far as this confidence which President Biden seemed to have, I've had a running debate with Ambassador Vivek Kaju over the last 10 days on this. And I learned a lot from his experience. And let me say, I think the world, why India alone, the world, everyone was applying a model, a military model of their own country to Afghanistan. And thinking that 350,000 strong is a large force organized as formations. In fact, they organized as corps, divisions, and brigades. And but there is an Afghan way of doing it. There's an Afghan way of fighting. The Taliban is doing it the Afghan way. The Americans could they give them equipment, they could give them training. What they couldn't give them was leadership. What they couldn't give them was the culture which was required to fight the Taliban. And that is becoming very, very evident. They had, the Taliban had the support of Pakistan, the money, financial backing from narcotics. And they also had one major factor, which Pakistan is very adept at, and that is psychological and information warfare. Okay. You see, half the capitulation of the ANA has been done through the very sophisticated information warfare, which has gone on throughout the last couple of months. And it seemed that the ANA was not up to it. They may have been apparently on the ground, it seemed. They had the troops, they had the organizations, but such forces don't just capitulate within a couple of hours. It happens because the whole specter of the danger of being captured, the danger of being defeated is built up in the minds of the soldiers. Okay. That's exactly what the Taliban has done in this particular case.
They won mind games, but is this big advantage Pakistan, victory for Pakistan at this stage in your appreciation, Ambassador Vishnu Prakash?
Good evening, Gaurav. Yes, today Pakistan may feel very happy, but what they are going to wear is a crown of thorns, and it is bound to come to haunt them. It is not just the Taliban, but it was the terrorists from Pakistan, the army regulars of Pakistan in Mufti. They all planned this. It was done with military precision, and what we see has been a cruel joke perpetrated on the brave people of Afghanistan. And it is the capitulation, I would think, of the armed forces, but there were three reasons. One, the morale was down. Two, the supply lines were affected. And three, they all come from the same stock. Even earlier, the attrition rate amongst the Afghan army was high. And when you don't see any possibility of success, and there are inducements, this is bound to happen. But the way this drama has been enacted with different characters, including the president of Afghanistan, even yesterday, yes, saying that everything is, we will regroup, we'll do this. Today, the defense minister says it is safe. Yes, but my citizens, it is safe for all of you, not for me. So I'm leaving. It is really a black day in world history.
A black day in world history. And is this, Sandeep, a big defeat for the United States of America? Look at the amount of investment in terms of blood and treasure. And has it all not come to a big zero, irrespective of what, Antony Blinken may say that they've achieved their aim and they now want peaceful transition? I mean, what world are they living in? Bagram airfield, Al-Qaeda terrorists have been released by the Taliban just an hour ago.
Absolutely, Gaurav. This is a catastrophe of the kind we haven't seen in a very long time.
And if you're talking about Saigon, there was resistance in Saigon. The South Vietnamese army was fighting the North Vietnamese army and the Viet Cong. But here in Afghanistan, it's going to be one of the biggest mysteries how 300,000 soldiers surrendered without firing a shot. 7 army corps surrendered. The United States, with all its intelligence apparatus, couldn't figure out that there was this huge mobilization of the Taliban that was literally sweeping through Afghanistan in the last month. And all the deadlines have been brought forward. We were talking of later this year that the Afghan government would hold out for very long, but it just unfolded in a matter of, it just folded like a pack of cards in a matter of days and hours, Gaurav. And the bigger worry for the world and in general, and India in particular, Gaurav, is the fact what happened in Afghanistan between 1996 and 2001. The country had become a global headache under the Taliban 1.0. You had all manner of extremists from Chechnya to Philippines flocking to Afghanistan under the shelter of the Taliban. They were running universities of terror there. I wouldn't believe this if I hadn't gone there and seen it myself in 2001. I know for a fact that there were all manner of weirdos from all across the world being trained and sheltered there. And the reason for the United States to go there in Gaurav in 2001 was the 9/11 attacks that was planned in one of those camps in Afghanistan by Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, who's now awaiting trial in Guantanamo. And now we have the very real possibility, Gaurav, on the 20th anniversary of September 11, the 9/11 attacks. On September 11, 2021, you're going to have the black and white flags of the Taliban flying in Kabul.
Once again, absolutely. And Ambassador Kaju, do you see the return to those dark ages once again? Bagram Airfield, high-value terrorists or high-value people who'd been kept in Al-Qaeda prisons, they've been released right now. So are terrorists going to be on the streets of Kabul once again? Will they rule Afghanistan once again?
Gaurav, permit me a minute on this, because I've heard my 3 colleagues on the panel very closely. They are people for whom I have great respect. I think they have enormous experience. Permit me to say that I've followed Afghanistan for a quarter of a century. I've served as in the External Affairs Ministry between the years 1995 and 2001, when the Taliban under Mullah Umar was there. I used to travel to Afghanistan during that period. I won't disclose anything further. Then I was ambassador there. So I have a little appreciation, I must say, very inadequate, but a little appreciation of the way of the Afghan fighting takes place. The mind of the Afghan I've tried to understand, and of the different ethnicities. I'm saying all this personal reference, because it was this that was leading me to urge our authorities from early 2017 to open up directly with the Taliban. Because one could see what was happening on the ground, the disillusionment taking place, the American project failing in Afghanistan. And one could not be blinded, and I'm using the word deliberately, by only the transformations that were taking place in the major cities. Because Afghanistan is not the major cities alone. That's an important aspect. But it is the rural countryside, and the reports that my friends were bringing in, etc., were very, very disturbing. Now, that is one. The question that you've asked is whether the Taliban have changed. And to that, my honest answer is, I don't know. And I dare say no one knows. We just have to wait and see. But that leads me to the...
that very important point you've raised, Ambassador, and I need to take a quick break here, but I'll come back to that point, because that's a very important point you raised about opening a line with Taliban. We didn't have it at the time of IC-814 hijack, the problem that we faced then. Should we have a line with Taliban now, and the humanitarian crisis on the streets of Afghanistan? What are women thinking in Afghanistan? You will hear them on the show. A quick break, back with lots more. Keep watching this special broadcast on a day that Ashraf Ghani, the president of Afghanistan, has fled. He's gone to Tajikistan, and Taliban are now in Kabul. That story and lots more coming. Stay with us.